Of the fantasy football season. And here's a few wide receivers I've looked at this week. The first guy, Devonte Parker of the Miami Dolphins. And Devonte Parker, he just came back after missing the last few games. And he had a big ball game at the Buffalo Bills here. 16.5 fantasy points in PPR leagues. 8 catches, 85 yards on 11 targets. So right here, I think he's going to be valuable to this Miami Dolphin team. Him and Tua, they started building a rapport over the last few games. Before he went down was Parker. Now he's got a good matchup in Week 9 versus the Houston Texans. And Parker right now, he's available in a whopping 65% of fantasy leagues. So he's a playmaker. Miami likes him a lot, obviously. And they get running with him and Jalen Waddle right now as their top 2 receivers. And I like the matchup next week. And he can make plays, this guy. This season, in the 5 games he's played, he does have 3 double-digit fantasy days, and his worst day being 8.20, so he's definitely not the worst of options, and he should be owned in more leagues here, is Devonte Parker, and he's definitely an ad on the wire this week. The second play is Jamison Crowder, and the New York Jets. Crowder and this Jet team, they had a good show out versus the Cincinnati Bengals and won that ball game 34-30. In Week 8 here. Crowder, 8 catches, 84 yards, and a 2-point conversion, and a fumble loss in the game. So right here, next week, they got a pretty decent matchup, Week 9, at the Indianapolis Colts that give up the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So the last few games for Crowder, he's been up and down. Week 5 at Atlanta, 4 catches, 24 yards, and a 2-point conversion. And Week 7 in New England, 4 catches, 34 yards. But right here, this quarterback, Mike White, to be honest, he looked better than Zach Wilson in that ball game, even though I know it's one game, but he had poise in the pocket. He was making quick decisions, and he was hitting his wide receivers, and Jamison Crowder had a good game, and I know Corey Davis was out as well, but he's still definitely a guy to recommend this week on the waiver wire, and he's available, Jamison Crowder, 81% of fantasy leagues. The next wide receiver is Randall Cobb of the Green Bay Packers. So Randall Cobb had a huge ball game. 3 catches, 15 yards, but the 2 touchdowns, obviously the big part for him in Week 8. And Devontae Adams is absent in that game, 16.5 fantasy points in PPR leagues. And I know this season hasn't been the greatest of years here for Cobb, but if it's one guy Aaron Rodgers trusts on that offense, besides obviously Devontae Adams, it's going to be Randall Cobb. And right here, he's making some plays. And Week 9 is going to be a great showdown at the Kansas City Chiefs here, where both offenses are going to go up and down the field, in my opinion. And I could see Randall Cobb having a good ball game in this one. So right now, he got picked up in a bunch of fantasy leagues for that Thursday night game, but he's still available in 64% of fantasy leagues. And he's definitely a wide receiver you should have consideration for, and you should add this week, especially with all the buys and injuries going around in the league. The next wide receiver is Taj Sharp of the Atlanta Falcons. So it looks like Calvin Ridley, he's going to be off for a while here due to off-field and personal issues here. He's going to be out a while. So Taj Sharp was the number 1 receiver over there for the Atlanta Falcons, and he had 5 catches, 58 yards in the Week 8 loss versus the Carolina Panthers for a 10.80 fantasy day. So Sharp, he's bounced around the league a few times throughout his career with the Titans, the Falcons this year, and last season with the Minnesota Vikings. So right here, he's going to have a role in this Falcon offense. And this Falcon team, let's be honest, they're a pretty bad team that's going to be a trailing in a lot of ball games where they're going to have to throw a lot. And Taj Sharp, he could make a few plays. He could be a decent playmaker, and he's available in 100% of fantasy leagues. And I will give him an ad this week. And the 5th and final wide receiver I looked at is Juan Smith of the New Orleans Saints. So Smith, he came off the injured list last week and had a decent game. And this week here in Week 8, he came out with a good ball game with Smith. 3 catches, 33 yards, and a touchdown. So Week 9, they got a good matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons here is the New Orleans Saints that give up the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So Smith, he's available in 97% of fantasy leagues. He's definitely a big target. He definitely can make plays. And we don't know, obviously, when Michael Thomas is coming back. So Smith's bumped up in that lineup. I know they got Callaway as well. They got Harris in the lineup. But anyway, he's definitely a player I would give consideration. And we saw him have some breakout games throughout his career. So right now, that's a few wide receivers I look to add here heading into Week 9 of the fantasy football season.